Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Conversations with Coaching podcast, or Conversations with Coaches. I used to call it Coffee with Coaches, and it took me months stumbling over that. Maybe I'll change it to Coaching Conversations. Anyway,
Conversations with Coffee.
Conversations with Coffee with Coaches. Clearly, I've already had a conversation with coffee today, but I'm about to have another one with Brian Gorman, who's a coach I've talked with before, who I had great delight in chatting with previously. And we've already started a very interesting conversation that we're basically just going to let you in on. But before we restart that conversation, let me reintroduce you to Brian. Brian's been in and around the developmental coaching fields for 5+ decades with really no signs of stopping. He's lived all around the country and coaches all types of people at any stage in their personal and professional development, high schoolers to retirees, everyone in between. He's an ICF certified coach whose clients are seeking transformational change in their personal and or professional lives. Using a model based on Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, he applies his decades of work in change management and his knowledge of neuroscience to guide his clients into their desired future. Brian, it's great to have you back. It's good to see you. It's good to hear you.
It's great to be here again, Kevin.
So I was just kind of like taking your temperature on 2023 and how it's been going since we last talked, which I believe was last fall. I forget the exact dates because, time is a flat circle, yada, yada, yada. But I was just kind of asking you how things were going. And unsurprisingly, we immediately found ourselves in what I thought was a very interesting conversation. And so I just wanted to start, hit record and get this on the mic. So we started talking about, in particular, kind of started with a podcast that you had recently done, where someone was talking about the nature of listening and how we listen. And we started to go some very interesting places from there. But if you could start us back up with that. And in particular, I loved the details, the data, the numbers really, really expanded my awareness. So let's start there.
So my podcast guest was Oscar Trimboli. And Oscar is the author of How to Listen, Discover the Hidden Key to Better Communication. And both in the book and in my conversation with him, he introduces 3 numbers: 125, 400, and 900. Our minds can process about 900 words a minute. Of that 900, when someone else is speaking, we can hear 400 words a minute. And that really helped me in particular understand why I can accelerate the speed on podcasts and listen to them at even twice the rate. Because the speaking rate, the English speaking rate in the workplace is only about 125 words a minute. So I'm speaking 125 words of the 900 words that are going through my brain every minute. Or as Oscar said, in the first minute that somebody's talking, they're only sharing 14% of the thoughts that they have.
My first reaction when you first were sharing this with me was, oh yeah, I find myself in conversations talking about listening and using analogies like bandwidth and just all the different ways we talk about being a good listener. But I just love the fact that let's just crunch the numbers. Let's just talk about what happens, what we're capable of, and what's the gap in there. What's that getting filled with? What's taking up that space? And I don't know. I found it immediately inspirational, quite frankly, to be like, oh, it's one of those things that's almost confirmatory where it's I know we're capable of being fantastic listeners and consuming and processing just tremendous amounts of information in a relatively short amount of time. Most of us are bad at it or not nearly as good as we could be. And that I as an avid podcast listener, I vary the speeds on my podcasts. I've been doing it quite a while. I'll listen to stuff up to 2x. If it's something a little more depending on what I'm consuming, I'll lower it down because I want to sit with it. I want to give it the space, but I've always been fascinated by my mind's capacity to listen to things and still really get most if not all the information at that rapid rate. but I hadn't really sat with the implications of that data. That's just very fascinating. I just love thinking about all the things that implies.
For me, one of the important messages is the importance of being comfortable with silence. Because if I'm processing 900 words and I can only get 120 of them, 25 of them out in a minute, instead of me just starting to ramble around and talk about anything and see where it goes and then trying to put it together for you, if I can sit in silence, or if I can let you, my client, sit in silence until you're ready to share exactly what the essence is of what's going on in your mind, it makes for a much richer content.
I agree so much. And I say that in the podcast host seat right now, where there's always a silence. Silence is difficult in the best of circumstances, I think. And it's a muscle that celebrates being exercised, I have found. And I think it has application in this context as we speak for a podcast, as we talk together. And I could feel myself I can feel myself slowing down to match your rate, to match your pace, because I want to have the most connected conversation I can have with you. And I'm feeling the silences begin to creep into the space in my words. And I'm feeling competing urges to let a silence sit, and then also to fill it as a host, to be listening for silences that are prompting response, but also be responsive to silences that wish to stand on their own. It's interesting. I'm feeling interesting things right now that I'm going to have to sit and reflect on a little bit after this episode. This is exactly why I wanted to talk about this with you, because I find it so fascinating how we move together.
So, Kevin, you're leading right into Oscar's description of 5 levels of listening. The first is listening to yourself. So you were just describing all of those things that you were processing, that if you're still processing them now, get in the way of you listening to me. So being conscious of listening to yourself allows us to come back to the conversation more quickly when we get distracted, because we are going to get distracted. Our thoughts are going to take us somewhere else. The siren out in the street is going to take us somewhere else. The whatever it is going to take us somewhere else. Being conscious of where your head is at is really the first level of listening. It's why when I'm working with clients, or even if I'm going into a meeting, not just coaching, I really try to spend a few minutes centering and getting myself fully present out of whatever the emotion, the drama, the challenges, the great feelings I had in my last space of time before that meeting or that coaching session. So the first is listening to yourself. The second is listening to the content. And that's really where most people, when they talk about active listening, go. What's actually being said? What are the words? What is the content about? But then Oscar talks about the third level, which is listen for the context. So as one example, I'm going to walk through an example that I used in a group coaching session not too long ago. I had a volunteer. I asked the volunteer, or I could do this with you, Kevin.
You know what? Weirdly enough, that sounds great. I actually had a coach take me through an exercise in an earlier podcast today, spontaneously, and so I have to say yes to it. This is clearly the theme of the day. Is let's run Kevin through his paces. So yeah.
Okay, Kevin, what brings you joy?
Family, and that includes my animals. We have 3 cats I love dearly, and I love spending time with them, with my family.
Okay, thank you. So I'm hearing family brings you joy.
Yes.
That's the content that you shared with me. You sat and you paused and you reflected before you answered the question. Mm-hmm. It almost looked like you were visualizing something.
What I was doing, and this is a habit that I've tried to grow in myself, is to reflect within myself in real time without stopping or stalling, so that I can give closer to genuine and full answers to questions that aren't just already floating on the surface of my brain, like, you know, like lily pads on a pond. And so, like, that's what brings you joy. That question immediately sparked me to hold it for just a beat, whatever a beat means, whatever a moment might mean in this context, because I wanted to let it bounce around inside me and then see what came up naturally. And so what came up, the first thing that came up naturally, that actually formulated properly, in my head, in my heart, wherever, insofar as that resides in separate places, they're the same place, really, was family. And it was both my partner and her parents, who I get to spend a lot of time with. They live very close by. And our shared animals, our cats, their dogs. It also kind of came with a sort of missing of other animals. Like, I haven't gotten to be around horses in a while, and I love horses. There are neighborhood cats that I love, that, like, I have regular, like I'm like an old man. I have regular walks that I take on a daily basis. And there are certain houses or certain neighborhoods where there's some outdoor cats that are just very affectionate. And when they see me, they'll start talking and they'll come up to me almost like dogs. And they're in a very weird way, but in a way that makes total sense. They're a part of my family too. So yeah, when I hesitated, I was less trying to pick out words. I was just kind of I was letting the answer come up from within me, if that makes sense.
It does. And now we're listening to the context and listening to what was unsaid. And so putting all of that together, you know, the short answer of my family, including my cats that I love to spend time with, really was just the surface of a relationship you have with your partner, with her family, with not just your pets, but her pets, and with neighborhood pets. And so what I'm actually hearing is, what brings you joy is sharing love with other living beings.
Connection.
That's the meaning. That's the full meaning.
There you go. Nice. See, I'm always rewarded when I allow myself to be genuine. It's just like, just answer genuinely. It's like, it might not be the coolest answer to be like, I love my cats. I mean, obviously it was a bigger answer than that, but I was just like, just let the truth come up and share it. And again, which also supports the conclusion that you drew, which is very, very accurate. That is the thing, maybe the thing that brings me the most joy, or is the center of all my joy, is that just connection with other living beings.
In a loving way.
In a loving way. Yeah, that resonates. Yeah, that's the word. That resonates with me. Like, I feel a harmonious echo in me whenever I think about that or hold that inside myself. I'm like, yep. I feel filled up by it.
And so we were talking before the podcast, before you hit record, about a coach who had to learn a whole new way of presence when moving from telephone coaching to video coaching. And what I was sharing with you is, this way of listening has really shifted my presence in my coaching on Zoom.
In what ways do you think has it shifted it, if it's describable?
I'm present at a deeper level. I mean, I mentioned earlier, I do centering breath work to be present. And for me, that's head, heart, gut, to really be centered, to be all of me there. but by being able to listen more deeply, it allows me to go more deeply with my clients.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel that. I definitely feel that. I'm thinking also about my own experiences with this video digital space that we found ourselves in, and the ways in which I know that I have, and a lot of the coaches I've talked to have worked diligently on using the tools that we have at our disposal. So, for example, sticking with the use of video and with Zoom, getting more practiced at emoting in ways that people can pick up on. For example, I thought a lot early on about the important role of body language in interpersonal interaction, and also the stuff that I don't really know a whole lot about scientifically, like pheromonal exchange and like the stuff that just passes between two human beings or two living entities when they're in the same space together. They're present physically. And while Zoom has tremendously expanded our capacity to literally witness each other, see each other, and express and connect, it has its obvious limitations as well. This podcast, for example, we typically only publish the audio, and because it makes people a little more comfortable. Also makes the file sizes way smaller, but that's a totally different consideration. But I always like to keep the camera on if the guest feels comfortable, because I know, and it's for two equally important reasons. I like to be able to see who I'm talking to, and even though you can't see me making, like, I'm looking at you when I talk, and I actually move your Zoom window up close to my camera so that you can feel at least something close to the impression of eye contact, so that I can communicate that intention, and I can see you and see your facial expressions and the way you're moving, and also so that you could see me. And so that, because I like to try to be as expressive as possible as an expression of availability, so that, like, when I'm like, you can kind of see my hands popping up into the screen when I'm talking, or when I shift back on my feet, or like I roll my shoulders or take a deep breath, or when you see my face get bigger because I'm leaning forward. I like to be able to show that, because while it's no replacement for the kind of interpersonal interaction that can happen in the same room when you're in the same space, I want to build as many bridges as possible, or at least open up as many available connections as is possible. And I've been fascinated by the development of these tools. I mean, new tools, same as the old tools, it's still a lot of the same foundational concepts of just connecting with people. And that very much includes listening, which is another interesting aspect of this, where it's the pauses. It's one thing I like about having you on Zoom, is that I could see you listening. I could see sometimes, like, if a guest is ready to speak, or if I've said something that has sparked them, I could see it on their face, and I can wrap up whatever the heck it is I'm saying, because I want to hear what they have to say. And I love this dance. I love the dance of it, and it's just new tools. And I know I'm actually kind of excited to see what comes next, even as I'm grateful for what we've been given when it comes to something like, the way that we're able to connect from, across the country in real time, in a way that's, I got to say, been pretty meaningful for me. Like, this particular conversation has been it's particularly meaningful. I've got some things to sit with and think about. And so I think I want to go ahead and thank you for that right now. I'll probably thank you again here in a minute, but this has been profound is a word that gets tossed around a lot, but this felt profound to me. So thank you for that.
Thank you. As I think we talked about earlier, part of my personal purpose at this point in my life is to do everything I can to share what I've learned with others. So this has been a gift for me as well.
I just my hosting duties just kicked in, and I looked up at the Zoom clock, and we've had a full conversation in a teacup. That was a minute, and that was a day, and that was everything in between. I'm gonna just have to have you back on again and have us have a conversation like this. This is the third leg that I kind of forgot to mention, but it's because it's like sort of the foundation of why I like to do this. It is not just about me connecting with you and you connecting with me and what's passing between us. It's about the vulnerability and availability to the people who get to listen to this. It's why I love just hitting record, because obviously we were already having this conversation from the moment we entered the Zoom room. We just started, connecting and talking like we do. But just that act of hitting record is a decision to, you know what, if there's one person who might hear this and themselves resonate with what we're talking about, be inspired to seek out coaching, or just to reflect on their own listening, or reflect on themselves and the way they move through the world. I mean, I'm going to throw another word out there that gets thrown out there a lot. I love that. And it's why I love what I do with this podcast, and why I love what I get to participate in and be a part of. So yeah, thanks for participating in that love with me today. And we're going to do this again. I'm going to bother you again to come back on to have another conversation like this.
I'm ready.
I get the feeling that you're almost always ready. I appreciate that about you. Well, Brian, I should get us both out of here. One more time, I thank you. I'm grateful for just you existing in the world. That you do what you do out there brings me joy and peace. And I'm very grateful that I get to share a little bit of time with you every once in a while. It's pretty special. So yeah, we're 2 for 2 in conversations. And I'm quite frankly, I'm looking forward to, selfishly, many, many more.
I am too, Kevin. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
And to those of you listening, I hope this helps. I hope this hits you where you need to be hit, and I hope this holds you where you need to be held. And in the meantime, I will be so grateful to get to talk to you once again in the not too distant future. Thank you.